this. Okay. And here you go, Christopher, so that you can see.
Okay. All right, so we'll start with some opening prayers, and they're on the coffee table there. Hi, guys.
I usually do.
Hi, Dickie.
Hi, Vicky. How are you? Hello. Vicky, and meet Chris. Ajay, meet Chris.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Young men whose names I never remember. This is Lee. I don't know if you guys remember having met
Yes.
Lee in the past. She was here when Geshani was
Okay, so we will start with the taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. And I think we can go ahead and do this in the Tibetan 3 times. Sangye chadang soki choknam la jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi dagni jinyang ipe sonam ki rola penchir sangye druparsho Sangye chodam soki choknam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi chenyen gipe sonam ki Rola penchir sangye druparsho Sangye chodam soki choknam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi chenyen gipe sonam ki Rola penchir sangye druparsho. The 4 immeasurable thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And then we'll go to the next page, the back of the first page, to the 7-limb prayer. When we get into the, I believe it's the 2nd chapter in the Bodhicharyavatara, Shantideva goes into detail about this whole practice. So this is a practice that, as Mahayana Buddhists, it is wise for us to be doing this, and so we'll go in much more detail when we get to that chapter. But here is just the outline of it. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And now we visualize a purified world, purified consciousness, purified form. And we offer this to all our teachers, all the Buddhas, all the Bodhisattvas. Zaji perki jokshing metok Tramri rabling ji nidegen badi sangye jingdu mi deulwagi drokunam dakshingha And then as we send this vision into the hearts of all the enlightened beings, we say, Idam Guru Ratnamandalakam Niryatayami. And before we start this series on Shantideva's way of the Bodhisattva, it would be good for us to set an intention here. And so if we look at the dedication prayers, and the very first, the second one that has the bullet says Jang Chup Semcho, let's just read this in English and think of this as our intention for the coming 10 or 11 or so classes that we do study this text. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And what that is talking about is bodhicitta, the mind that wants to become enlightened, sees the value, sees the reason, sees the logic in becoming enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. And Shantideva's text really, really goes into this in great detail. And I think I will do my best to try and unpack it. These are kind of the main books. If you wanted to buy any of these books, this one, which we gave a link to, is by the Padmakara translation group. It's published by Shambhala Publications in Boulder. This is also Padmakara translation book published by Shambhala Publications in Boulder. And what this is a commentary, which is, I would say, the commentary is essential. And we will be using this commentary and other commentaries and other authoritative texts as we go along. But these two are, if you wanted to get any, these would be the ones to get. So when Geshe Nima was here, he asked that we study this text, Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara. And this is not a text that I myself have studied in detail. Everything in the text, all of our teachers have taught us before, and I'm familiar with certain things about Shantideva, some of the history I'm familiar with, some of the practices, but never have I actually gone into this with sort of an in-depth look at how to go about this. So as I was researching this, I found, and I had put a link to this, I don't know if any of you watched it, but we're going to go through it today, an introductory talk given by Wulstan Fletcher, who is the main translator of this text. And he also did the translations for this commentary, which was a Tibetan commentary from the 19th century. So it's a wonderful thing to have. It's part of the whole lineage that comes from Shantideva, that all through Tibet, all through the centuries. It comes down to this commentator had a teacher who was very, very strongly connected to the Bodhicharyavatara text. And so this is a really great commentary to have. So Wulstan Fletcher, who's the commentator, gave an introductory talk. And I can't do a better job than he did, because I don't have I haven't studied, I don't have the background. So what I want to do is basically go through his talk. I took a lot of the things that had to do about very, very scholarly things that had academic things that had to do with translation process, which they're great, they're important if you want to get into that. But in terms of practice, what this is about, I took those things out. I also added, I don't know if you remember Geshe talking about Alan Wallace. Alan Wallace, he's an American. He's an American scholar, Buddhist scholar. He also was ordained. He's doing all sorts of studies on meditation. But he and his wife Vesna wrote a little history of Shantideva, which I've included in here as well, to sort of give the background for how this text came about. So, pardon me reading, but that's what's going to happen here. So Wulstan Fletcher started out with some preliminary remarks about the particular qualities of the Buddhist teaching, and they're great, because he really touches on points that I think are what really distinguish Buddhism from other spiritual paths. So he said, although Buddhism is classified as a religion in the West, it has characteristics that are quite distinctive and not like other Western religions that you may have come across. And one of the main differences is that it's not the product of divine revelation. It's not as if some God came to the Buddha and said, here's what I have, I'm going to download it, and you get it. That's not what it was. The Buddha, through his own experience, came to this understanding that he has that he gave. So what he did was he taught the nature of the self, which we've all been talking about, and the nature of phenomena. Everything that is not self, including our body, is phenomena, according to Buddhism. Okay? He talked about what phenomena are, how and why phenomena appear, and the structure of the mind. And when we're talking about mind in Buddhism, it is synonymous with consciousness. It's not the brain. So what the Buddha was talking about when he's talking about the structure of the mind is the structure of our consciousness, our awareness, how it works. This is fantastic material. Not everybody's interested in it, but for me, it's a cross between science, real science of the mind, and a really deep spiritual path, a very productive, infinite spiritual path. This is also, this is great. Even though the implications of the Buddhist teachings are huge and they're vast, there's nothing about them in principle that can't be known by us. They're not a mystery. If we study them, there's nothing that's being kept from us as a mystery. Whereas in some other practices that I've done, you'll get to a point and they'll just go, it's a mystery. It's like, okay, that's okay, but I really want to know. And so I guess this is why I've been attracted to Buddhism. One of the most important statements the Buddha made is that we should not trust blindly anything he said. Mm-hmm. He said, think for yourself, put the teachings into practice, use your logic, use your reasoning. If it makes sense to you, then accept it. That is really liberating, I think. It's very liberating because it puts huge responsibility on you, and the Buddha, it also shows how much confidence the Buddha had in his own message. It says, don't believe me, don't trust me, you try it out for yourself. Mm-hmm. It's quite a different model. It also frees people from depending on the Buddha as a person. The test of the Buddhist teaching is not whether you can prove that historically he said it and historically he existed. The test of the teaching is in our practice of it. Mm-hmm. Does it work? That's the whole proof of the pudding. In the pudding? So this is also something that's happening now. There are many aspects of the Buddhist teachings that can be used independently of the Buddhist tradition itself. For example, the teachings of the Buddha on psychology and afflictive emotions. If any of you are familiar with Venerable Robina's teachings, mm-hmm. It's psychology, it's afflictive emotions. It's great, and people love it. Not necessarily Buddhist practitioners. They just love it because it makes so much sense. So there's a spillover into other non-Buddhist traditions that the Buddhist teachings on psychology and emotions make a lot of sense. This has become quite common in America, and actually there's no reason to think the Buddha would be unhappy about it. However, the Buddhist techniques that are being applied outside of Buddhist traditions can be used for different reasons and objectives. If these techniques are being used to improve one's experience of cyclic existence, to sort of make cyclic existence more comfortable, more palatable, then you can be sure this is not what the Buddha had in mind. That's not what the Buddha's intention was. It was not intention to sort of make cyclic existence, put a nice face on it. The actual intention of the Buddha was the opposite, to sort of free us from cyclic existence, to understand that the cyclic existence came into existence or comes into existence because of ego grasping, ego self-grasping. That's why cyclic existence exists. And the whole point is to cut that ego self-grasping and liberate ourselves and others, as if you're going the Bodhisattva path, from this sort of trap, which is actually never the happiness in cyclic existence is always temporary. Mm-hmm. It's always temporary, and there's always a downside to it. And we know this from our experience. We know this. So that's an important point. So when the other systems sort of appropriate parts of Buddhism, that's great, it's helpful, but it's not actually the Buddha's intent. If it's about sort of putting a nice face on all of this, it's not what it's about. When we study the text of the Bodhicharyavatara, which is the Sanskrit, the original Sanskrit name of the text, which means the Bodhisattva way, we're going to find many aspects of it that don't sit well with our modern attitudes. And as I was reading through some of them, it's true. It's from a completely different time, the 8th century, from the point of view of a celibate monk who was teaching celibate monks. So we have to sort of step back from it. And when we read some of these things, which may seem really, not politically correct, not gender correct, all of these kinds of things, we have to treat it, not be triggered by that because of our present day contemporary view, which in many aspects is really good. I mean, the progress that has been made in gender acceptance and the women's rights, and I mean it's huge. If you think over the centuries, when the Buddha existed, when Shantideva was alive, this is all over the world, really. Women were seen as property. Mm-hmm. Property. So we have to be careful when we look at the text and what's being written here, that we understand the context and why Shantideva is saying what he's saying, so that we don't just go, oh, no, I'm not going to look at anything else. He's a misogynist. He's not. It's not that way. But you have to look carefully at it and understand the context. Okay, so now, and of course, the Buddha always said, you don't have to believe anything I say. If you don't like it, don't take it. Just use what works for you. So that's another thing to remember. So now we're going to go a little into the historical background of the text. When the Indian Buddhist scholar Atisha, and we all know Atisha because he was the one who sort of helped develop the Lam Rim stages of the path. When he was living in Tibet in the 11th century, he received a message from India that the master Shantideva, who was one of Atisha's teachers at the Vikramashila monastic university in India, had died. When Atisha heard this, he burst and wept into tears. And his followers were saying, why has this upset you so much? And he said, because in all of India, there are only 2 people who actually understand the true intent of the Buddha's teachings. And they are Shantideva and myself, Atisha. And so this sort of lets you know that there was, at that time, there was a real cross-pollination between Hinduism and Buddhism. And there are many, many aspects of Buddhism that are taken from Hinduism. But the really distinctive factor, the distinctive message of the Buddha, which has to do with the self, which has to do with emptiness, that view, that was not part of Hinduism. And so it got confused and mixed up. And one of Wulstan Fletcher's teachers had said, we're fast approaching that time right now. Because as I was saying, as Buddhism is sort of brought into sort of New Age philosophy and things like that, it sort of gets mixed in, cross-pollinated, and people can become quite confused about what the intent of Buddhism is. And so that's why the teacher was weeping, because he thought it would be lost. Of course, it wasn't lost, because he transformed everything in Tibet, and it's been passed down through the centuries from all these teachers, and we've got it. We have it intact. It's an amazing thing. An important point to bear in mind, and I sort of touched this, is when we're approaching Shantideva's text, what he says is sometimes not what we want to hear. Nevertheless, it's important to take it in and to take account of it, even if you decide not to accept it in the end. In other words, keep kind of an open mind, because some of the things about hell realms and stuff, we all know, it's going to trigger us. It's not what we want to hear, but we should take it into mind, look at it, and see if we can make the context work for us now. So here's Shantideva's life story, and this is coming from Alan Wallace and his wife Vesna. Shantideva, an 8th century Indian Buddhist monk, lived in the 700s, is among the most renowned and esteemed figures in the entire history of Mahayana Buddhism. According to two brief accounts of his life from Tibetan sources, he was born into a royal family, sort of like Shakyamuni Buddha, and he was destined for the throne. But on the verge of his coronation, Manjushri, who is an embodiment of wisdom, and Tara, who is a feminine embodiment of compassion, appeared to him in a dream. And they counseled him not to ascend to the throne. So he left his father's kingdom, retreated to the wilderness, and devoted himself to meditation. During this time, he achieved advanced states of samadhi, which is, basically this, when Geshe Nima was teaching us shamatha, it's a similar kind of concentrated meditation. So Shantideva achieved advanced states of this meditative concentration, and also various cities. Cities are kind of supernatural or paranormal abilities that begin to occur as one reaches very high levels of meditation. So many of the stories that even Geshe Dragpa was telling us about, things, crazy kinds of things, where the people can control the weather, they can levitate, they can do all kinds of interesting medical surgical procedures without instruments. These are things which we go, come on, but not Geshe Dragpa, not why can't I think of his name? Togme, who lived in a village up in the mountains in northwestern India, but what used to be Tibet. All kinds of things were going on there, which we would say, "Oh, come on, and he was saying, well, "You don't believe me." Like he was surprised. You know, it's a different when you live in an environment like we live in now, where we have mass media, educational systems. They all kind of put a box around everything and lock our mind into a certain way. This is what it is, and it keeps getting reinforced. Mm-hmm. So nothing unusual can happen, right? And I'm saying this because of the story about Shantideva and how this text was delivered. But I personally have had enough experiences in my own life of things that have no explanation whatsoever, that whenever I've told people, they'll say, "What drugs were you on?" And come on, I was only 16. I wasn't taking any drugs. I mean, I wasn't, not even drinking. And these things happened, which were you just would go, no, that's not possible, but it is possible. From my own experience, I can say there are things that we don't understand, mm-hmm. and simply because we don't understand them doesn't mean it's not possible. So sometime after he achieved these high levels of attainment, Manjushri appeared to him similar to the way Manjushri appeared to Tsongkhapa. And they began to have a relationship as with Manjushri was his mentor and his teacher. So sometime after his stay in the wilderness, Shantideva made his way to the renowned monastic university of Nalanda in northwest India, which is not far from Bodh Gaya. It's about 50 miles from Bodh Gaya, where he took monastic ordination and he devoted himself to the thorough study of Madhyamaka philosophy, which is the highest philosophy in all of Buddhism, particularly Prasangika Madhyamaka, which is what Shantideva specialized in. But as far as his fellow monks could tell, all he did was eat, sleep, and defecate. I remember Lama Pasang used another word for defecate, which we were like, oh, that's a song. You said the S word. So, seeking to humiliate Shantideva and force him to leave the monastery, the other scholars coerced him into reciting a sutra before the monastic community and the public at Nalanda's outdoor courtyard, a task that they thought far exceeded his abilities. So they set up an enormously high lion throne for him to sit on with no steps to get up there, thinking, oh, this is going to be fun. We can all get a good laugh and humiliate him, you know. So when they got into the courtyard, Shantideva was already at the top of this high throne, and nobody could understand how he got there. And so he said to them, do you want to hear something original? Do you want to hear some standard sutra text, or do you want to hear something original? And they went, oh, we want to hear something original from you. We want to hear something original. So he began to recite or chant the Bodhicharyavatara. And during this astonishing recital, Manjushri appeared in the sky. And many people there saw that. And it sort of triggered a lot of faith in them. When Shantideva came to the beginning of stanza 34, which is in the ninth chapter, it's towards the end, it's the chapter that's on wisdom, it's the chapter that's on Prasangika Madhyamaka. And he said, when the true existence of phenomena and the true existence of emptiness no longer appear to the mind becomes perfectly peaceful and free of concepts, which is actually the key to the Madhyamaka teaching. And at that point, he and Manjushri began to rise higher and higher into the sky until at last they just completely disappeared from view. However, Shantideva's voice continued to resound so that the transmission was completed. Everybody could still hear him. And so this created such a stir. The listeners who were there were several listeners, and I'm sure there was a training. They probably went through some training of how to either notate when you're hearing something good, how to notate that, or how to put it into your memory. So many who were there had slightly different versions of what Shantideva had said, and they wanted to find out, well, what's the correct version of this? Some had, 700 stanzas, some had 1,000 stanzas, like that. So, but they didn't know where Shantideva was because he's just disappeared into the sky. Well, they heard through the grapevine or whatever that apparently he had landed a little south, sort of towards the east coast of India. And so they sent down a group of scholars from Nalanda to find him and say, well, what's the correct version? And so he looked at what they had written and he said, oh, well, this one's the correct one. And so that's how that particular Sanskrit version.
And it was the shorter stanza.
It was actually the longer one. It was the 1,000 stanza one. That was the correct one.
That had like interjections of other people's opinions included.
The whole thing gets really, when you start to get into that academic kind of like where did it really exist? It's not important for our purposes.
Right.
Because, like the whole story of him floating up and stuff.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, it's possible.
Right.
As far as somebody else is concerned, they'll say, oh, that's just a myth and it's symbolic and it means this or that. And it can be seen both ways. It can be seen both ways. It does have meaning.
It is said that Teresa of Avila would levitate when she was in prayer.
Right. It's not unheard of. My parents in the
Spanish nun.
my parents in the 80s, and of course you all know, or maybe don't know, but my mother was totally into spiritual practices, but also psychic phenomena and supernatural kinds of things, like siddhis, right? And she had heard about from somebody that in Lubbock there was somebody who was sort of channeling the Virgin Mary at some little church in Lubbock, and that the Virgin Mary said there's going to be this event that's going to happen. So my mother knew about it, so she got her friend, she got my father who was not into any of this, but he went, and turns out there were tons of people there, and they actually saw things in the sky, my father included. He actually saw things in the sky, and he said there was somebody. Some people couldn't see, some people were seeing different things. Some people could see more detail. Some people were just seeing colors. My father saw all these colors swirling around. Other people were saying, I see Mary and Jesus, right? So there was, my father said, there was somebody there, this was before iPhones, this was in the 80s. So somebody had one of these instant cameras. And so they were saying, where do you see her? And they pointed the camera at where the person said, there's Mary and Jesus. My father said the thing came out. And it developed, and he said it looked like a holy card or something, because there was Jesus with the little baby in the sky. So, yeah, Mary with the little baby, Jesus in the sky. So make of it what you will. All I'm saying is, I think these things are possible, but our minds are shut down to it. And I know people would disagree with me, and that's fine. So after that, after Shantideva told him which was the correct version, he eventually retreated to a monastery in a forest that was filled with wildlife. And during this time, it's said that he displayed a lot of his amazing siddhis, these abilities. Eventually, he renounced the signs of monkhood, and he wandered about India, devoting himself to the services of others. So this is the next part, is about how the Bodhicharyavatara spread to Tibet. Shantarakshita, who was in his own right a really renowned 8th century Buddhist scholar, he was the abbot of Nalanda. He was younger than Shantideva, but he was the abbot of Nalanda while Shantideva, or he would have been at Nalanda while Shantideva was there, and maybe he was the abbot a little bit later. But Shantarakshita knew all about this, and so he was invited up to Tibet to sort of bring some Buddhism texts, because this is the first time Buddhism was coming into Tibet. And this is before Atisha. This is a couple of centuries before Atisha. So Shantarakshita went up to Tibet, and one of the texts he brought was this Bodhisattva Way of the Path. And so it shows you right then, during the 8th century, during the time of Shantideva, it went to Tibet and was translated into Tibetan. So, and it also shows you that the fact that Shantarakshita took that as part of all these other ancient famous texts, but brought this one, means that this was something like, it's sort of like spread like wildfire through the monastic centers in India. And it was sort of like a bestseller, if you want to put it in those terms. And it, right in that same century, made it to Tibet. So we have a very early translation into Tibet from the source. And Shantarakshita set into motion the whole process of translating Sanskrit texts into Tibetan.
Something that we read the other night, Tibetan, they had developed woodblock thinking, and so they could.
Yeah, the Chinese and the Tibetans had
whereas Sanskrit was all.
Yeah, Sanskrit was hand copied, and when the copies were made, changes were made, and things like that. You know,
so the
just
Tibetan copies were able to be multiplied and circulated faster.
Right, and they stayed.
More consistent.
Yeah, they were consistent.
They were just carved once.
Right. So this is the translation that we that we start with. And it's been transmitted through the centuries by generations of scholars and practitioners who've actually put Shantideva's text into practice. So it's become a kind of transmission of experience that comes down to us from teacher to teacher to teacher. So then when, Geshe Drakpo or Lama Pasang or Geshe Nima are talking about these teachings of Shantideva, they've been transmitted down the centuries starting from this text. So this text is important for us to be using because it represents a lineage, our lineage actually. For anyone who is a Mahayana Buddhist, that would be our lineage. Later on in the 11th century, that's when Atisha came for the second dissemination. What had happened is in between the 8th and 11th century, there was a king. His name was King Lung Dharma, who was a follower of the Bon religion in Tibet. And he sort of persecuted Buddhism. And so Buddhism went into a period of decline. And finally, after Longdharma's death and things began to turn around, that's when another king asked Atisha, who was at a monastery also in northern India, to come to Tibet and sort of help get Buddhism back to where it was. And that's how the whole Alam Rim and all of that evolved from Atisha. So this Atisha started what is known as the Kadampa tradition in Buddhism. And the Kadampas had 6 particularly important texts, one of which was the Bodhicharyavatara. So this, now you all remember from the Lamrim when we talked about the 3 scopes of practice during the Lamrim, the initial scope, the intermediate scope, the advanced scope. That came from Atisha. That came from Atisha's, the way that he laid out the Buddhist teachings. So Mahayana Buddhism fits within an understanding and framework of the entire path of the Dharma that became common in Tibet following Atisha's influence. Spiritual practitioners can be divided into 3 groups, what are called the 3 kinds of beings, or the 3 scopes. Wulstan Fletcher says it's important for us to think about this because it's a way of actually understanding where we are personally within this framework. The 3 scopes have to do with happiness, what you consider to be happiness, what sort of happiness you're looking for, or from the opposite point of view, what you're afraid of. From a Mahayana Buddhist perspective, if you're talking about a spiritual path, you're talking about a path which includes a future existence, not just this material existence in the ordinary sense that we're presently experiencing. The beings who are on the first scope, who are those who understand happiness in the way we would normally understand it. Now, I'm comfortable, I'm successful, I have enough to eat, I have enough money, I have some good friends, I have children, samsaric happiness, right? That's the first scope. So if you wanted to capsulize what that means, it's a fortunate rebirth as a human or something higher like a god, and the avoidance of an unfortunate rebirth, say like as a wild animal or something lower than that, like some kind of insatiable ghost, that can never get any kind of satisfaction. In this first scope, according to the Buddha, the karmic principle that drives our experience is ethics, the way we behave. So the teachings that are given on the first scope tell us how to create the causes of happiness in the ordinary sense of the word. If we're looking for happiness or rebirth in some higher realms of cyclic existence or samsara, this is the way to go, ethical discipline. So we understand what we should do and what we shouldn't do. It's an ethical teaching. So the tone of the first scope teachings is about the kind of ethical behavior that produces happiness. So this is the part of Buddhism that's really similar to other religions. Other religions are quite like this. The ones I've studied, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, it's all the same. It's all ethics. This is how you get to heaven. How you get to heaven is ethics. How you get to hell is being unethical. And that's basically it. Yeah, I mean, from my understanding. Buddhism goes along with that up to a point, but the distinctive characteristic of Buddhism really, they really kicks in with the second scope. Instead of being satisfied with happiness in the ordinary sense of the word, second scope practitioners feel that the ups and downs of samsaric happiness are suboptimal. Birth in the higher realms is not satisfactory because it's impermanent. The attitude of the beings of the second scope is not just to have higher rebirths in samsara, but to get out of samsara completely. Stop it. I want out. I want out of it. The whole cycle. I want out of it. In order to do that, one has to understand what the root cause of samsara is, which is clinging to a self. That's the root cause. So from the second scope onward, we have the kind of Buddhism that's not shared with other spiritual traditions. And I think he's right about that when I think about it, because other spiritual traditions will talk about something like a soul, which is like a self. It's like this kind of permanent thing, whereas in Buddhism, they're talking about there's no permanent self at all. So the main feature of the beings in the second scope, they want to leave samsara, they want to get away from suffering and its causes decisively, and here's the thing, they want to get away from it for themselves only, alone. Just, I want solitary nirvana, and then I'll be happy.
Right.
There's no thought about bringing others along with you. So now we go to the beings of the third scope. The third scope are those who are concerned not only with their own suffering, but the suffering of others. They therefore wish to attain the spiritual capacity that will allow them to place other beings in perfect happiness, in a state of perfect happiness. If you want to look at it from the point of view of fear, instead of what we want, of fear, what you're afraid of, a person of the first scope is afraid of suffering in some kind of lower realm of cyclic existence, afraid of not having a good birth. A person of the second scope, you could say, is afraid of cyclic existence itself. They see that cyclic existence is not a satisfactory way of being, and they just want out of it. So that's what they're afraid of, cyclic existence. From the third scope, the third scope people are afraid of the self-centered wish for happiness for one's own sake. They're afraid of that. They're afraid of not having bodhicitta, the wish to attain enlightenment for the purpose of freeing others. And, from my point of view, having studied Buddhism and having studied all the three scopes and having studied emptiness and Tantra and, with the incredible teachers we've had, where I've come to is it's only logical. It only makes sense that you would be a third scope practitioner, because once you realize that everything is a dependent arising, meaning everything is interdependent. That's the way things are. What sense does it make to sort of go off by yourself and separate off from everything? It only is logical that you'd go, I want this whole interdependent thing that is what my existence is, interdependence. I want the whole thing to be purified, to be working, functioning properly, to be happy. I want everything to be, transformed. But I came from that from the viewpoint of logic. Not that I had some kind of bleeding heart. That's not where I was coming from. But logic led me there. And it has opened up my heart, which is unusual. You don't usually think logic would. So there are ways of going towards this. A compassionate heart, somebody who really cares about others, would go, why would I want liberation for myself alone? I care too much about others. And that would lead a compassionate person to understand why, to understand the true nature of things. And they would become rational and logical also. So the path works both ways. It's very good. If you take a step further to Mahayana practitioners who are on the Vajrayana or tantric path, and this is, considered one of the highest paths. What they're afraid of is ordinariness or ordinary appearance, because what they're interested in is called pure vision, where everything is transformed into a pure experience. So that's what Tantra is all about. It's about seeing yourself and all phenomena as completely purified. I often think of, the last scene in Beauty and the Beast, where everybody gets transformed and purified, and everybody's all happy, and like the teacups and everybody turn back to who they were and go, ah! So that's how I kind of see Tantra. So everything just becomes purified. Tale as old as whatever. So that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it, what you're afraid of. And basically, it's really important for each one of us to go, where am I? Where am I on this? And I can say for sure, probably all of us don't want to have, don't want to be reborn as a demon in hell realm, and things being poked into us. We probably don't want that. We might not mind being somebody's pet cat, right?
Well, it depends on who the somebody is.
It depends on who the somebody is. But beyond that, I think most people just go, yeah, I think I want kind of a fortunate rebirth. We seem to take for granted that, I'm a human, I'm always going to be a human. But why? Why? When it all has to do with ethics, we seem to maybe take for granted that ethics don't matter, but they really do. So, other than that, each one of us has to decide for ourselves what scope we're on. We have to look really seriously into our own mind and say, what is it that I actually want, and what is it that I'm actually afraid of? Because if you look at these scopes, if you're going to practice the Mahayana path, and you are a practitioner and you say that you're on the third scope, well, in order to be in the third scope, you have to completely understand the second scope. You have to understand the Hinayana point of view, right? You have to understand what that whole process is. And in order to have the third scope and the second scope, you have to understand what the first scope is. Because if you're Hinayana, you have to understand what you need to be is born as a human. You have to be born as a human to even be able to practice and understand the Dharma, or something higher or equal to a human, So, but it doesn't go the other way. You can be on the first scope and not care about nothing other than having a good rebirth. You can be on the second scope and care nothing other than being, get me out of samsara. I want off, and I want off by myself, So it doesn't go both ways. But if you're a Mahayana practitioner, which means you're trying to go all the way, you're going to encompass all of these three scopes. Okay. I hope we get through all of this. It's really good. This is why what the overview he's given.
Well, you can.
It's fantastic.
If it doesn't get through all of it today, you can watch the video.
Yeah, and also I've printed this out, so I'll put it up on the website. You can download it.
I think those intent is to start from
Yeah.
chapter 1 and just one chapter.
I'm going to do one chapter.
A week, and then you will read and study yourself.
Yeah, I won't cover everything in detail in each chapter, but I'll study them thoroughly. I'll study the commentaries thoroughly for each chapter, and then, some of the chapters may be able to be combined in one, because but when we get to things like the chapter on wisdom, that could easily be two, and
We
then
have a commentary that just didn't even include the chapter on wisdom.
Yeah.
I haven't showed that under.
Even when the Dalai Lama was teaching this, he got to the wisdom and he said, "I've run out of time. I'm going to have to come back to." It was in France. I'm going to have to come back and do a special thing on wisdom, because it could take up the whole thing.
The whole time.
So, okay. Oh, and this is interesting. Why the Buddha decided to teach. Another thing we should note is that when the Buddha attained enlightenment, he said, I've discovered something which is so profound and so subtle that I don't think anybody's going to understand it. And he said, I think I'll just, I mean, this is the story that all of our teachers have told us. He was just going to stay in the woods in Bodh Gaya until his body, expired, because he couldn't say, there's no way I can explain this to anybody. But what happened is, beings from a higher realm sort of appeared to him and said, no. There are beings within samsara that will be helped by this. Please do your best, try and get this message out. So when the Buddha said, okay, he went to, I think it was Sarnath, which he gave his first teaching. And what it was this group of guys that he used to, they were ascetic friends of his,
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he didn't say anything like, I have discovered something really amazing and let me tell you about it. And, what you guys are just really all wrong. You're acting really bad. You're mistaken. And, let me show you. He didn't do anything like that. What he said was, you have a problem, and that problem is suffering. And I have found a way to help you with that problem. And that's how it started. He wasn't making any big shows, no big flashy, I'm the Buddha, follow me. It wasn't like that. It wasn't that way at all. It was just like, I understand you. I understand what the problem is. I've figured out what the solution is, and I can help you if you want. It was like that, and that's the way the Buddha decided to teach. So when one is practicing Buddhism, when one is trying to understand the teachings and put them into practice, it's never a question of feeling that we're somehow special or superior. It's not at all, especially when you start thinking about interdependence and dependent arising. It's not there. It's not a question of spreading the word either. That wasn't what the Buddha was trying to do. It's not about spreading the word, because, there's going to be a lot of people who don't even want to hear it. So why? There's no reason to. The people who want to hear it are going to find it. Mm-hmm. And eventually, when a being has experienced enough suffering, hitting their head against the wall enough times, going around and around in this samsaric cycle, each one of us at some point will get to the point where we'll say, there must be another way. What is it? And then we will seek out the Dharma ourselves. And I can imagine that's probably unless you were born into it, that's probably what's happened with all of us, It's certainly what happened with Kavita and I. Mm-hmm. And it's more like an all-pervasive suffering. It's not like your life is so bad, but you begin to see, this happiness that I'm struggling after, it's actually just creating more problems. Every little thing you do just creates more and more and more and more layers of issues and problems, and you go, boy, this got to be a better way, and that's what happens. So now we go into otherwise teaching the Dharma is a waste of time. It's just a waste of time. If it's not helpful, if people aren't interested, why? So now we go into an overview of the Bodhicharyavatara text. And when the commentators begin talking about this text, almost all of them quote this stanza from Nagarjuna, which we read this morning. And the way he translates it here, it says, "May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it is arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more." So there are the three stages to that. Where it has not arisen, may it arise. That's the first stage. Where it has arisen, may it not diminish. That's the second stage. And may it continue to flourish, grow intensify more and more and more. That's the third stage. So the Bodhicharyavatara, the 9 chapters, the 10th chapter is a dedication. The 9 chapters are divided into these 3 phases of bodhicitta, which is may bodhicitta arise. So the first 3 chapters are about looking at the value of bodhicitta, the benefits of bodhicitta. Sort of Shantideva is getting us kind of excited about bodhicitta and what it can mean. So that's 1, 2, 3. The second 3 chapters are about not letting it backslide. Not letting it backslide. So in the second 3 chapters, Shantideva starts to scare us a little and tell us what can happen if we let this bodhicitta sort of degenerate. And it can degenerate really, really easily. It is important that you constantly keep with it, because it's like dropping a ball. Once you've dropped it, it's gone. It's hit the floor. And it'll take a lot to get it back. You have to start over again. And then the third 3 chapters are about how to intensify that. So that's where we have meditative concentration. That's where we have wisdom, these kinds of practices to intensify the bodhicitta. And it's interesting that, when we're talking about meditative concentration, when we're talking about wisdom, in the context of the Mahayana, it all has to do with how we see other sentient beings, how we connect with other sentient beings, the value of it, what the nature of reality is, and beings and phenomena. So that's what the wisdom and meditative concentration are working or helping us get towards in the Mahayana path. Not just high states of mind and special kinds of abilities and all this kind of stuff that can you can impress your friends with or something. It's a much vaster and broader reason. So the first 3 chapters, they're the excellence of bodhicitta. The second one is confession. The third one is taking hold of bodhicitta. The next 3 chapters are carefulness, vigilant introspection, and patience. Those are the chapters that are saying, don't let it backslide. And then the final 3 chapters are, it's meditative concentration, wisdom, and dedication. Yeah, okay. So now here's an overview of chapter 1, the excellence of bodhicitta, where we are. Oh yeah, we're not going to cover all of this. Shantideva, but it's good. I mean, we should do it. Shantideva starts by talking about the excellence of bodhicitta, what a wonderful thing the way of the Bodhisattva is, the practice of what's called bodhicitta. He goes through a whole list of stanzas in which he explains the benefits of bodhicitta. This is a good one. For instance, anyone who truly has bodhicitta and who dies in the state of bodhicitta can never fall into any of the lower realms. It's like having a protector with you. I mean, Shantideva says it's like having a strong guard protector with you who will not allow. When you have that, if say you died thinking, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of it, may they be free from suffering. Well, your mind is not headed towards a lower realm. That's just so logical. And if you've been practicing this throughout your life and you are really feeling that, it protects you at your death. You're not going to have a bad death. When I think of our friend Carolyn, who 4 hours every day without fail, even when she was on vacation, meditated and practiced. And her teacher, Sakya said, she wasn't like this great advanced practitioner, but when she died, and we saw it, she was blissful. I mean, on the other hand, when my sister died in confusion and fear, it was a terrible thing to see. With Carolyn, it was a beautiful thing to see. So, and Carolyn was practicing bodhicitta. So I've seen it myself. So, despite what they, in addition to what they say, I've seen it. So this is worth developing. It's worth developing. Shantideva says that even somebody who is suffering in the dungeons and prisons of samsara in the worst possible situations of total deprivation and depravity, and that's going on in the world right now, today. I mean, forget the lower realms and the higher realms. It's happening right on the planet. They are totally transformed and become a child of the conqueror if the thought of bodhicitta takes birth in them. They become an heir of the Buddha and become worshipful to gods and humankind. It's that transformative. So what he's trying to do for us is whip up a feeling of enthusiasm about bodhicitta. These are the chapters that are talking about the benefits of bodhicitta. It's useful because even somebody who's on the first scope who just wants to escape suffering and doesn't want to go to a lower realms, even somebody who just has that aspiration can develop what's called aspiring bodhicitta. And it's the aspiring bodhicitta, it doesn't have to be engaged bodhicitta where it's a much higher level, and you're, the stories you hear of people, cutting off their skin to feed a mangy dog and stuff like that. That's engaged bodhicitta, which we just think is bizarre, right? But just aspirational bodhicitta, the wish to, attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, feeling a connection, that's enough to assure you of a higher rebirth, of having a good death. So even for somebody on the first scope, we can all have this aspirational bodhicitta. It doesn't take these strenuous kinds of practices and things like that or courage to get to that point.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
From your point of view, how would you characterize the differences between compassion, aspiring bodhicitta, and engaged bodhicitta?
Well, compassion is the wish that somebody else doesn't suffer. And I mean, we can have a compassion for our pet cat, but not for, our neighbor. If somebody's doing, that's all compassion is. It's just the wish that you don't suffer, okay? But it's can be quite limited to who we like, and we don't have compassion for those we hate normally, or those who are harming us normally. We don't feel a sense of compassion. When we're talking about aspirational compassion,
Bodhicitta.
Aspirational bodhicitta, yeah. We've now got this idea in our mind that things are actually interconnected. We are not all separate the way we appear to be. This comes through studying Buddhism, studying Mahayana Buddhism. Therefore, wouldn't it be nice if everybody, had happiness? Wouldn't it be nice if just on the world, this planet alone, wouldn't it be nice if everybody had happiness? Nobody was suffering. Everybody was completely joyful. That would be nice. And once you have aspiring bodhicitta, you could wish that for Hitler. You could wish it for Trump. You could wish it for Biden. You could wish it for, somebody who killed a member of your family. When you have aspiring bodhicitta, you begin to see, the thing that's causing people to behave in these horrible ways is self-grasping, cherishing yourself, So we can have, that's engaging bodhicitta is when you are all out doing it. You're living your entire life that way.
I think I'm asking you to clarify the difference between what we simply call compassion and bodhicitta.
The compassion is the wish not to suffer. Bodhicitta is the wish that all beings be happy.
Isn't there some element about?
Yeah, that you want to stop the suffering. May I be the one who can take all beings out of the suffering. But bodhicitta is for all beings, where compassion, you don't want someone to suffer, but it's not for all beings. We don't have that feeling without bodhicitta.
Go ahead, Brian.
I don't know if I agree.
But if you have that feeling, that means whether you call it aspiring bodhicitta or not, you already have that.
What I mean, you can you can have compassion for all sentient beings, or you can have compassion for some sentient beings, but compassion is compassion, not limited by who it's applied to. To me, the bodhicitta, and I mean, aspiring bodhicittas, you know, you want to be practicing the bodhicitta's ways, you know, engaged as you're actually doing all that stuff. But, you know, it seems to me that the bodhicitta is a way to practice compassion for sentient beings.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. What you're saying is from a personal standpoint. Yeah, absolutely. You can have, what I'm trying to say is a murderer, somebody who goes out and kills people, a mass murderer can also have compassion for, you know, their pet cat. You know, but that's a limited compassion. So compassion is the same.
Is that in the Mahayana? Is that in the? See, I mean,
that would be in samsara itself. Samsara. So compassion exists. We have compassion. Right. We just naturally have it. But what I'm saying is, somebody like you say, a mass murderer, they can still. They're very destructive. They're killing people. You cannot call that compassion. But their compassion for their little cat, who they feed and give a bowl of milk and whatever, and they pat, that still is compassion. Compassion exists. You're right. Compassion is compassion is compassion. It doesn't matter who. The difference, bodhicitta is a compassion that extends out.
Activist oriented. Can you give, please, the textbook definition of bodhicitta?
Bodhicitta is the wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings.
So, Chris,
the wish to better yourself so that you can help all sentient beings, so you can benefit all sentient beings.
So would the practice of bodhicitta, meaning the compassion that I have, you know, to myself or my family, practice of bodhicitta would help me make it for all sentient beings?
Absolutely, yes,
it's almost like a
even
pathway.
So
to put the image, I think that's how I'm understanding. I have compassion, yes. Everybody,
compassion is a natural thing that we have. Animals have it.
Sort of like a post sign or path to walk, so that I have this compassion for all the sentient beings. And I take bodhicitta as a process to get there, which is never-ending learning process, I think. Because the compassion is the root, and which everybody does have. But bodhicitta is something that we can walk on, take it, learn it, so that we expand it to the whole sentient being. I think that's how I take it.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
It's going to be hard to explain bodhicitta with this compassion, but
well, I mean, Chris, when you said if our monk said, please define bodhicitta, and you gave the answer.
That's the definition, yeah.
Well, I mean, so the active, important, pivotal difference is
you want to better yourself, so you can, right. You want to go all the way. Basically, bodhicitta. All right. This is a good point. Bodhi is the same exact. It's the same as Buddha. Yes. Bodhi. It means awakened. Awakened to what? Awakened to reality. And so Bodhi and Buddha both have the same. It's the same meaning, that you have removed all of the defilements within your consciousness. They're completely gone. Those all defilements all arise from ignorance, a misunderstanding the way things actually exist. The more we can understand the way things actually exist, the more we will be able to get rid of all of our afflictive emotions. They just are. It will be a natural byproduct of, as we better ourselves and understand what's going on. The second, Buddha or Bodhi, the D, the second syllable, refers to attaining all of the positive, perfect, wonderful states. You know, the love, the joy, the happiness, the altruism. You know, wisdom. All of these really high positive states are a result. And so this is of getting rid of all of this ignorance. So that's what Bodhi means, and that's what Buddha is. So within the word itself, within the name itself, is what bodhicitta is, or what a Buddha is. It is a process. It's a process of removing ignorance and growing all of your good qualities to their perfection.
Request as you go forward in this series, if you would continue to clarify that.
That's a good point.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
Continue to clarify that bodhicitta is a particular thing. It's not compassion. And if you, and I think I agree with Brian, I don't think your example of murder, and I also think you're wrong about aspiring versus engaged bodhicitta.
Well, what would you say,
I
Bill?
think inspiring means you're still, it's about yourself. I want to become a Buddha. And you think it's a good idea that I develop Buddha qualities. Engaged is when you say, okay, fuck, I'm gonna do it. And you actually start some much harder level of work where you're not just wishing someday to be, queen of the universe, but you're gonna start developing the actual.
I don't think they're so cut and dry like that. I think it's a process.
Yeah, I know, I mean,
Yeah.
I just base it on what my
Yeah,
understanding
Yeah,
is.
I think, but I don't disagree with it, but it is a process. I mean,
I'm
when you're
saying
starting
that
out.
The difference between aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta is about you.
I don't think I agree.
I think they're both. I think they're both.
I love it.
Well, according to all of the texts, there is a difference between engaged bodhicitta is a much higher level. It's your entire existence is now about your entire existence is about helping others.
I took two different sets of vows. One is I'm taking aspiring bodhicitta vows, which is I'm taking the vows.
That's the vows that we take when we take bodhicitta vows.
Okay?
Bodhisattva vows.
But that's about me aspiring. And then later on, I took engaged bodhicitta vows.
But it's also about you engaging.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's about me.
But again, sorry, go ahead.
But what is then? But then as you get higher and higher on this path, define what me
I'm just saying
is. Define what me is.
I'm just saying the reason there's they talk about aspiring bodhicitta as opposed to engaged.
Because it's a
bodhicitta
process.
is because it's about where you're at.
Where you're at and then where
It's
you're
not about
wanting to
whether, it's
go.
not about how you feel about.
One thing I want to just remember that
Where you're at is how you feel.
Chris, the term you define bodhi
Mhm.
and chitta. So I'm thinking
Oh, chitta
these
is
are the two words.
yeah. Bodhi mine. Chitta
bodhi
is mine.
what he explained. Chitta is your heart.
Mind,
your
heart.
Mind. It's a Sanskrit word, and we use that every day.
Yeah.
Chitta means chitta. We say chitta dukkha means you know what do you call it? You hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Chitta dukkhayo means I hurt his feelings. So chitta is a word, bodhi is a word. So I think it's a combination of bodhi, chitta. So that's something to think about.
Awakened.
Chitta
Yeah,
means
awakened
your
heart, mind.
yourself,
Yeah.
that's it. So
Awakened heart,
bodhi,
mind.
so bodhi and yourself is, I think that's what the word totally means. So
Yeah.
that gives you something to think
Yeah.
about. That it's related to chitta, which is the heart.
So aspiring bodhicitta would be you're aspiring to have an awakened heart mind. Engaged bodhicitta would be you are engaging in an awakened heart mind.
Right, but I think that the only thing I would clarify maybe in terms of what Alita was saying is, when I think about this, my motivation for aspiring bodhicitta has nothing to do with me. So I don't think I'm doing this so I can help somebody else. I just say, take me out of the equation. I do it to help. It's happening, or I'm working there so other sentient beings can benefit. Period.
Right.
It's not about what happens to me. It's not about how I make it along the path. It's not about where I go, what I become, what I cut off, whatever, the action is. It's just that this is the path to truly reach the ability to help other sentient beings.
The fact is, helping other sentient beings is going to make you happy.
Maybe, but the intent here matters about why you're doing something.
And intent does matter.
But well, all right. Let's go back. Wait, we're back. We are all
You're a
interconnected.
doctor. You had to go to medical
Wait.
school, so you had to change to help others.
We are
That's what they're talking
all
about.
interconnected. You
Right.
could say it's like one big organism that
It
has
is
aspects,
exactly
right?
what it is, though.
So logically, yes, you're doing it to help others, but that also is a benefit to you because it's part of the system within which you experience yourself.
Right, but I guess what I'm hearing Kavita say aspiring is about
Well, we all come from
No,
different
no,
places.
no, you do training, you can't be a benefit. That's
No,
the
I don't
whole
disagree. I don't
No, that's not true. I agree with Brian. You can be of benefit. It's just not going to be of benefit to the entire
You're gonna
universe.
be unskillfully harming as you try to help, as we all are already all doing every day.
Well, my darling girl, I mean, until we become Buddhas, we won't even be able to walk on the ground without hurting sentient beings.
That's the point.
So we are aspiring.
We're still aspiring to hover over the ground. So
All I'm
we don't
saying is
hurt
we,
anything.
it does refer to us because we are saying, I have to change.
Okay, all right. I will say it. Brian is right and you're right, because when we say we, it has to include I. I am part of we.
Correct.
It has to.
You remember they always said,
So-
take the Dharma as personal instruction.
Yeah,
That means something you have to do,
of course.
because you have to change. And so it's very nice to have this expansive view of wanting to help others, but you know you can't help others skillfully until you develop the skills to help others. So you study, you get on the path.
This is
The
why-
path is the methods to be skillful.
This is why the Dalai Lama could not complete the wisdom chapter in one teaching, because it's the wisdom chapter that allows
Okay.
the
More
full
clarity and understanding.
the full blossoming of what we're talking about here, of
Yeah.
becoming a Buddha, or a Bodhisattva is an awakened being on their way to becoming a Buddha. Bodhicitta, awakened heart, mind. Awakened to what? It's basically awakened to reality, the nature of reality, how things actually exist, how the self exists, how phenomena exist.
And how it's all interconnected.
And it is interconnected. Everything is a dependent arising, therefore interconnected. Like I said, you can come at it from a compassionate heart, you can come at it from logic, but if you follow the path, it's going to bring the two right together. Wow. Well, actually, this is quite good.
Chapter one.
I know, we could continue to do this too, because it's very,
really
Well,
helpful.
we could read the book, if maybe what we should do is we should read the chapter if we want to have questions and discussion next week.
yeah. But however, some of these chapters, we need to go into
Yeah, we need
depth.
to,
The commentary is
Let's put you
extremely
more-
helpful, yeah. All right, let's just keep going until we can't. All right, in the first chapter, Shantideva says there are two kinds of bodhicitta. There's an aspirational bodhicitta and a bodhicitta of engagement. They are both immensely important. Of course, the bodhicitta of engagement is even greater than the bodhicitta of aspiration. And so it's clear that even if we are not particularly good at practicing or meditation, we can all have this aspiration. We can all be bodhisattvas in aspiration. This class of beings can include us. Aspirational bodhicitta, which is something we have to cultivate, is the protection Shantideva is talking about. Aspirational bodhicitta has to be cultivated. I guess engaged bodhicitta is doing it. So obviously, I'm on the level of aspirational bodhicitta. I'm cultivating this, You're on the level of aspirational bodhicitta. I can't say where anybody else is because I don't live with you. But absolutely, I mean, what you said, Brian, what you said, Ajay, what you said, Kavita, I agree. It's just, it's a big thing. It's a big thing to figure out. This is something new. We weren't, maybe you guys were raised this way, but we weren't raised with this information.
So a lot of new concepts.
Yeah. But it makes so much sense to me. Okay. So that's the first chapter. So maybe we covered the first chapter. I don't know. The second chapter, I'll see how quickly we can do some of this. He goes on to say now that we're interested in bodhicitta, interested in the path, what do we do in order to set out upon it, right? He says there are certain preliminaries and preparatory practices, and these are the subjects that are described in the second and third chapters. He goes into all these preparatory practices. The preparatory practices document that I made, I had Geshe Nemo look at, and he made a few corrections, and he gave his stamp of approval. I'm also going to have Venerable Robina look at it, since she deals with people in the West so much, just to make sure that there's no mistake that they see, no problems there. But that is based on this. All the texts that are talking about preliminary practices are based on Shantideva, on the second chapter. In order for bodhicitta to take birth, we have to have what's called merit. Merit's a tricky word. It's a translation of the Tibetan word sonam. The trouble with the English word merit is that it has connotations of being deserving, something that makes you some kind of special person. What would you say sonam from your understanding?
Sonam would be every good deeds that you do, right? And then you accumulate the good deeds, like good karma.
Yeah, and so you're developing kind of a positive energy.
They say that some people are born into such a good family and good environment, and they say, oh, maybe he had a lot of good sonam from last
last life,
right? Like a good karma.
Yeah, so that's what Shantideva is talking about. When we hear the word merit, sometimes we think, I deserve, I merit,
Right.
And so sonam is more like a buildup of this positive action, good deeds. And so that gives a positive energy to your path as you're going on. So what Shantideva is saying is that we have to accumulate that. That you have to accumulate, and that's what the preliminary practices are about. Part of what they're about is accumulating merit. So here's what Wulstan says about the sonam. Sonam is more like a kind of positive energy that's generated in one's mind on the basis of certain kinds of actions and certain kinds of attitudes. In general, they're activities that draw you away from ego clinging and selfishness, which lie at the heart of the samsaric problem. This being so, even animals can generate sonam or merit. The mother chicken looking after her chick. Granted, she's probably completely dominated by the power of instinct, but even so, she's doing something to protect another being. That is positive. And so that chicken is developing sonam.
Yes.
Just through that.
Positive energy.
So when we see ants, animals, the deer, and you see a mother doe protecting the baby, that mother doe is developing sonam, developing this positive energy. We wouldn't call it merit,
Right.
but that's what Shantideva is talking about, and we need to develop that in order to move on this path of bodhicitta. We need to develop it.
It's like when you're learning to play an instrument and you practice, you get to a point where you're able to, it comes out of you very naturally. So that accumulation of
That's a good
practice
example.
would be
Yeah.
very-
And people hear an accomplished player and they go, oh,
Right. Right.
And
that's a lot of sonam.
and you just carry it in you,
Right,
wherever
exactly.
you go.
Exactly. Good idea.
You just take it with you, right?
Yeah.
Well, have you ever seen some of these videos, YouTube videos of these little tiny kids? They're playing the piano like some master jazz pianist.
Right.
How is that
How is
possible?
Right.
How?
That's a
They brought it
build
with
up,
them
an
the
accumulate. They
previous
brought it
life.
with them.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, you could say it's a type of sonam. It's a type
Right.
of positive. It's not negative.
No.
On the other hand, somebody who comes out being angry and kicking and wanting
Like
to kill.
Venerable Bina said, I was born angry.
Nobody had to tell her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
So,
always talks about that.
and we're all on different, within the spectrum, we're all, different stages. Okay, well, we need to wrap this up. So,
But we're in chapter 2.
yeah, we're on chapter 2.
So there you go.
Yeah, okay. So we want to be developing sonam.
Yeah.
In order, it's very important too, because we will not understand prasangika majjhimika if we haven't developed sonam. If we haven't developed that kind of merit, that positive energy, that sort of what the teachers say is it's like sort of like an onion, right? There's all these layers and layers and layers. Well, our consciousness is like that. There's all these veils of obscurations around our consciousness. I know I'm using my head because that's where I feel the consciousness is, but if you think of it that way, your consciousness is veiled. It's sort of covered up. And as we develop sonam, this merit, what they call merit, the veils start to drop. You know, they start to drop. It gets clearer. It gets clearer. This is why then we can begin to understand these higher concepts, say, of prasangika majjhimika. But if we don't, if these layers, these obscurations aren't dropping, we're going to look at that and go, I see the words, but I don't know what the heck they're saying.
Right.
And I mean, Geshe Nima pointed something out to me in a Chandrakirti book that he told us to get, which is a huge book on emptiness. It's on the higher Majjhimaka view. So he said, I want you to look at these particular pages. So we got post notes, put them on the pages. I'm looking at them in bed. And I was like, I am seeing words, but I do not know what those words are saying.
Right.
And basically, that is because I'm obscured. The clearer that I can become, the more
You can see.
I'll be able to see it. I've even noticed this on a very subtle level. When I'm in a very positive state of mind and I'm reading some Dharma, it's clicking, it's clicking, it's clicking. You know, when I kind of there's some afflictive emotions going on, it's not even worth looking at. I'm saying some mantras is worth it, you know, because the mantras can sort of get you back into a positive state of mind. It's interesting though, you know.
I just, in this conversation, this idea of accumulation, you know, builds up to sonam sort of idea.
Well, you're accumulating sonam to get, yeah.
Well, in other words, you're doing every moment that everything you think and say and do is either accumulating positive vibes. And so it's like,
Or not.
it's like sending yourself to finishing school, you know, where when you go in this kind of rough, you know, they'll say diamond in the rough, and you come out this very poised, lovely person.
We're sending our consciousness to finishing school.
Instead of having, I'll be honest, until we had this conversation today, I've always felt uncomfortable with what does it mean to accumulate merit? What is?
I know, that's the problem with merit.
No, it's like what I think and say and do at every moment, and I'm either refining myself or I'm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And as we refine ourselves, everything starts to clear up. We get more finished, you know.
So this sonam versus the word karma, they're not synonymous?
Karma, I don't know how to explain it.
Karma is like an action.
Well, karma is defined as an action, but each action then creates some
I would
preponderance.
say sonam is more with intention and action together, right? Like you do. We would say that even giving a glass of water to someone, you are accumulating sonam. Because that person is so thirsty and you have given him a glass of water.
So giving the glass is the karma.
Karma, but you have the intention
Yeah,
of,
the
oh,
intention.
he's so thirsty, I want to help him out, you know.
Okay.
Like,
Right. Noun versus.
And through that, then you accumulate sort of an ongoing positive energy.
yeah.
Because
Potential.
and I mean, the second noble truth, you know, it's karma and delusions is what creates your suffering. So the karma, the actions you take create suffering, and over many lifetimes, the accumulation of those actions and their preponderances, I don't know whatever, that seem to follow you from lifetime to lifetime.
Yeah,
So does that mean karma with a negative intention might be a bad karma? So the action of giving a glass of water with
A negative
some kind of
intention.
negative intention might create a bad karma.
Yes.
So sonam is something that
It's a
will
good
happen
karma,
regardless,
I would say.
but your action will probably define what are you going to get.
Right.
So bad karma versus good karma. So I think that's what sonam and the karma difference is.
Yeah. Sonam is always good.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
an
Right.
accumulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not quite the same.
Positive accumulation.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So it's connected though, for sure.
Karma
In
is
Hindi,
almost
karma is almost, it's a word for action.
action.
Yes.
Karma, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then good karma would be sona, with the
Okay,
positive
yeah.
action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good karma.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah, it's
I
good
like this
karma.
idea of the finishing score, of learning to play an instrument or just anything.
I
with
like the
note.
finishing. You go, Gigi.
It's important to understand that we're refining ourselves, so, and it almost feels like you could say that the sonam is the accumulation itself.
Mhm.
So as you become more composed, more patient.
The
more
sonam grows and grows and grows.
That's
Yeah.
evidence of your accumulating.
Yeah.
Okay,
sonam.
so-
The
I love this that we're talking about sonam.
Yeah.
It's a word we can now use
Right.
in place of merit.
So when we
Yes.
talk about purifying karma,
Yeah, that's in the second chapter
yeah,
too.
we talk about purifying karma. Obviously, we're purifying what we think is negative karma.
Mhm.
So therefore, you never can purify sona.
It's pure,
because-
baby.
It's already purified.
Yes.
Mhm. So I want to know who's keeping the abacus of all this stuff.
Just keeping score.
That's an interesting
I mean,
question,
if you're
isn't
in
it?
the animal realm and you're a mother chicken taking care of your chicks and doing something good, I mean, where do you cross the line into the next realm? I mean, you know, how do you?
I'm not
Or you're
sure.
a human who you had this precious human rebirth and you're a complete
Sure.
jerk. Yeah,
I know.
Interestingly, they say we've all been everything.
I know.
So,
It's
I guess we go up and down depending on our intention and our karma.
Maybe you take care of somebody else's chicken.
All I would say is, next time you go to think about, killing an ant or using poison on a
yeah.
mouse or something like that,
Yeah.
think about sonam.
Right.
Think about the life of that being. Think about
Babies it might have to, it still needs to take care of and
Yeah.
feed.
Think about the connection. I mean-
Too, by injuring that
And
one.
I
What-
think which drops down to compassion.
It always,
Absolutely it
always
does.
comes down to that.
So,
but also love.
Right.
love, yeah.
But also love.
Love and compassion.
Because what they say is everything that appears to us is our karmic appearance. So if we're seeing, rats infesting the chicken coop, and we have a choice to kill them with poison, this is our karmic appearance. They've shown up because of some karma of
Right.
ours, right? So basically the intention is, neither of us want to harm them. We don't want to hurt them. So this is where you sort of can shift and you can purify,
Right.
because everything that appears to us is our karma, good and bad. And we have the chance to purify everything that appears to us.
Well,
our
like
relationships.
An example of your mother and Mary and all
Oh,
that
yeah.
kind of stuff. Depending on where everybody was on their level, they saw different things.
Right.
So
Right.
their reality looked different based on their karmic.
Well, in the story of Shantideva, when
When
Shantideva, when Manjushri appeared in the sky,
Right.
not everybody saw Manjushri.
Exactly.
Some people did.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a karmic image. Almost what you see this world versus I see is totally
Right. It's
different.
totally
Right.
We
different.
think it's same, but
Right.
I think
And some things are
which is the
similar.
internal path.
Yeah.
It's totally different.
Well, and the trippy part is we all see this house. We all see this
Yeah.
tape. We all see
Yeah.
Christopher,
Right.
and Christopher looks similarly
Yeah.
to us because we are all
Yeah, his
seeing
physical form
Christopher.
is
Right.
there.
Right.
So I think
Right.
the internal connection is different, and
Yes.
that's the karmic image we
Yes.
and I were born with. So
Right.
you and my energy vibration would be probably different than you and her or you and him.
Sure.
I
Right.
think
Right.
that's
Right.
our karmic
Right.
image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what this all existence is.
Right.
I
It's
know.
really existence.
That'll be in the chapter 2.
Okay, so we covered chapter 2. All right, I guess we're
Well,
past.
reality.
Well, and after everyone that we've ever
There
done
is no
chapter, we
birth,
go
there's
get.
no death. There's
Now we
just
covered it in the next chapter.
When you get to the chapter of
The
emptiness,
next chapter.
Yeah.
There'll always be a next chapter.
Maybe a good thing to do is just read his introduction for a particular chapter and then look at the chapter,
Yeah.
so that we can, because raises some good discussion.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Very helpful. I'm so grateful about Sonam.
I think we should all do a homework about, having accumulating some sonam.
There we go.
Giving someone a glass of
Accumulate
water.
good soda.
That's what his
I
parents used to say.
Vicky, just the teacher,
Yeah.
just give her this homework.
Oh.
Like some old lady, give her a glass of water.
Exactly. I always think about it.
Get you a glass of water.
Well, I hate to belabor this, but we were talking about this morning. So on our trip to India recently, we visited the monastery where Shantideva lives, right? And, along the way, we met a lot of different people. And you should give an offering. You should give an offering to this person. You should give an offering to this. Well, you should give this amount to this person, maybe this amount to that person. Then, it's like, okay, what's the kind of thinking here about why this versus that, or put it here and not here? And, you can have, the positive intent is just be helpful and, help them, but still there's some sort of differentiation, I would say, in terms of the type or how much or whatever, and so you're kind of still trying to figure. I don't quite get the overall scheme here, the overall plan here.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, everything's our karmic appearance, right?
Right.
I never experienced anything like that. So you're experiencing that. So there's something for you to figure out. I mean, and you're thinking about it. You're going, what's going on? So basically you could sort of think about that and figure out what you think is being done there, what you think the meaning is there. Can you find it? I mean, because the intent is always to be a benefit, right? The
My intent is to be a benefit.
Right.
But I'm being instructed
Right.
by Geshe-Nima.
There may be something
That he can see.
that Geshe-Nima is seeing where, well, this, the benefit would be greater if you gave more money. Say you gave more money to somebody who really, really needed it, and he knew that. But somebody who didn't need as much, you give them a little less, but you're still helping. You're still being a benefit. I don't know.
Right.
But that's kind of like you can take the whole thing as a teaching. There were things like that happened with Geshe Drapa, which were totally confusing to me, but I took it as a teaching and learned a lot from it.
I think it's also because, it's a totally different culture over there, and a lot of rituals, the things they do. I used to have this with my mom. She would say, okay, for this you can give this much amount. For that person you can just give less. And she would say, why? And I would say, why? I should be giving the same amount, right? And she would say, because that person has enough. He doesn't need as much help as this person.
And you can see why it would be so good to be able to be omniscient, right?
Right.
Then you would know exactly what to do, how to help,
Right.
and at what level. Anyway, we should.
Right.
Okay, the dedication prayers. So we're going to do this one again. This precious Bodhi mind, Bodhicitta prayer. This is Nagarjuna, by the way. This prayer. Okay. Jung Chups. Oh no, wait. Oh, let's do this dedication of Sonam. Let's replace merit with Sonam. Oh, I love it. Okay. Due to this Sonam, may we soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that we may liberate all sentient beings from suffering. Jung Chupsem Chogrim Poche Ma Kirpanam Gyegyuchi Kirpanyampa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Du Per Washo Dong Ye Tawa Rinpoche Ma Kirpanam Gyegyuchi Kirpanyampa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Nu Per Washu. And then let's say the final dedication in English.
Okay.
In all my lives, may I not be separated from true lamas, and so enjoy the splendor of Dharma, fully perfecting the virtues of levels and paths. May I speedily attain the state of Vajradhara. All right. This is great, everybody. Love the discussion. It's great. Thank you, Wulstan.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great, the discussions.
Could you hear it? Could you hear it all?
Yes,
Oh, good, good.
it was wonderful.
Nice to see you, Mira. Yeah, you should come sometime. This is kind of fun.
No, I do. I want to. Yeah, it was fun from here, but more fun from there, I'm sure.
Sonam, sonam.
Um,
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I want to say thanks to everybody